you got to have good friends that'll hunt the North Fork with you, because, you know, we're about 6 to 7 to 1 for every grizzly you see. You'll see one black bear. And
you know, there's several groups out there that are putting money into wildlife research, and some of them are, you know, faking the funk when it comes to being conservation organizations. But you were bear hunters that started this organization.
Actually, to ensure a future for bears and bear hunting, you have to ensure a future for bears first and foremost.
We know that the hunters are going to be the ones that foot the bill for wildlife management.
And I think a lot of people want to make sure that stays that way too. And that's what scares me when I hear some of the outdoor industry leaders starting to talk about backpack taxes. What do you tell a group of bear hunters back east here? What do they need to do to make sure that they have a legitimate voice when decisions about bear management, bear hunting are being made? Welcome to the Houndsman XP podcast, everybody. We have got Steve on the line coming at us from hot and muggy Florida. Good evening, Steve.
Good evening, Chris. Good morning, America.
Yeah. Well, we normally do record these in the morning, but due to work schedules and our guest today, we switched it up, and we're actually recording this one in the evening. So we're looking at some 70s moving in here by the end of the week. I'm pretty excited about that for daytime highs. And I know your weather down there is the same as it always is, hot and muggy.
Oh, yeah. It's always like opening the oven door and checking the pizza, you know, is kind of like what it's like walking outdoors here. But, man, we are hopeful. It's going to get cooler every day. We're looking forward to that. And if it's true to form, this is August, about last of October, 1st of November. We'll start having some cool weather.
So when you get cooler weather down there, though, that means it's getting cooler up north. So your population of Yankees goes up at that time?
Yeah, about late November is where the migration starts down Interstate 95 and 75, and the snowbirds come in for a landing, and they'll be here until about mid-April.
Yeah.
And, that's when we get out the bumper stickers that say, "We don't care how you do it up north," and we put those on our trucks. And seriously, we have I have a lot of friends that come down, and I'm envious. They're living the best of both worlds. But at any rate, yeah. But this is a time of year when we just kind of hunker down in the air conditioning, watch a lot of hunting and fishing videos, and wait for cooler weather.
No doubt. Everybody's waiting for that, I think. Well, Steve, we've got a great guest for tonight's show, that's for sure. We'll kind of introduce our guest here, but we've got Joe Kondelis of the Western Bear Foundation, and I kind of started following Joe and the Western Bear Foundation. I can't remember how long ago it was, but it really interested me, the work he's doing out there in the Wyoming area and in the western United States for not only hunting black bears, but also conflict mitigation with black bears and some of the conservation work they're doing. So without further ado, Joe Kondelis, how are you tonight?
Doing well, guys. Doing well. Thank you guys for having me on tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, Joe, I mentioned a couple things there, but you're from Cody. Have you lived in Cody your whole life?
Yeah, no, I live in Cody now. My wife and I moved down here in 2005, kind of for work. But I was born and raised in Southwest Montana in a town called Butte, and was born and raised there. Went to college in Butte, and then kind of work in business and then do this on the side. And it's actually become a lot more work than I anticipated when we started the organization, but I love it because it lets me do a lot of things that are really my passion, which is conservation, wildlife, and hunting and fishing. And so it allows me to do some stuff in that space and still do work for a really cool company in my career. So yeah, that's what kind of my history. Like I said, moved down here in 2005, and we love it down here in Cody. It's just been an awesome place to live. Very small community. Not a lot of people here. The mountains are right out my back door, so it makes it pretty nice.
Yeah.
Well,
great.
I've been to Cody, and I think Joe and I visited a little bit earlier about that. And man, there's a lot of things to see and do with the museums you have there, the Buffalo Bill Museum and the Gun Museum, and it's just a really neat town. And of course, I've always like to seek out the fly shops when I go out west. And man, I've had a lot of fun. The first time I went out to Wyoming, I flew into Worland. Took a stump jumper out of Denver up there, but the second time I flew right into Cody and from Salt Lake and across the mountains there, and man, what a view! I'm sure you've done that.
Out here. Yeah, we're pretty fortunate out here to live where we do. We're I'm 50 miles away from Yellowstone National Park. I got one of the biggest wildernesses in the lower 48 right out my back door. A very small population in Wyoming, so it makes it really nice. That means the woods are often pretty quiet, and there's not a lot of folks out there. So when you can get out in the mountains and spend some time, you actually get to go experience it and kind of appreciate it for what it is. And you're not fighting people. And the summer's tough. We have a lot of tourism in Cody because of the park and the museum, as you mentioned, is a huge draw for us. But great place to raise a family. I absolutely love Wyoming. I do miss Southwest Montana, but it's only 4 hours away for me, so I get to go back a lot. And being part of the foundation gets me all over the place now, so I get to see a lot of cool places.
Yeah, that's an awesome area. Do you hunt the North Fork there?
Yeah, I do a lot of deer hunting up the North Fork, and I do some bear hunting up the North Fork, actually, which is you got to have good friends that'll hunt the North Fork with you because, we're about 6 to 7 to 1 for every grizzly you see. You'll see one black bear, and some of those grizzlies you see can be in some pretty tight confines. So I got a couple guys that'll go with me up there. I think a lot of people think I'm crazy, but we do a lot of bear hunting up there and a lot of deer hunting up the North Fork in that late migration that happens out of the park in late October, early November. So spent a lot of time in that country in Sunlight Basin, as well as the Bighorn Mountain Range, which is just kind of east of me here.
Yeah, it's a wonderland for sure. Chris, have you been out there?
Yeah, I've been to Cody. I love it.
Yeah.
Love Cody. It's we went to the rodeo there and kind of did a tour up through that country. But went out to Jackson Hole and Yellowstone. It was when I was a kid. It's been several years, but it's definitely one of my places that I plan to return to.
Yeah, we got to get you back here, Chris. Jeez.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, Joe, I remember my drive over from Cody over to going to Worland. I drove over to, what is that, Graybull?
Graybull, Wyoming, yep.
Yeah, and you go through a town, if I'm correct, it's population 10. Is that like
Emblem?
Emblem. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a good memory. Yeah, Emblem. It's got a post office.
Population 10. I
think we might have got a little bit more in there. I'm not sure. I'll have to look. I drive by that a lot. I'll have to look at that sign.
Yeah, that was great. I fished all over that and up in the Bighorns up there and Norwood Creek and
Norwood. Yep.
Norwood. Yeah, Paint Rock, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And
beautiful down there.
And a beautiful little canyon up there we call Deep Creek Canyon, I think. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's on private land. But giving away all the good spots here.
Well, I tell you, you sound like you're from here. You could pass as a local.
Well,
you got all the names down.
Yeah, well, Ten Sleep was one I remember very well. You know what that is, Chris?
I have no idea.
It was like from Montana somewhere. Joe, you could help me. It's like Ten Sleep.
Yeah, it was north up towards and I might get this wrong. There's a sign in town. I should memorize it, but it was 10 Sleeps from that location. It was an Indian encampment, Native American encampment in 10 Sleep, Wyoming, and to travel north, I believe, up towards Montana to another encampment they had was 10 Sleeps, or they were 10 Sleeps from somewhere when they were at that location, so they called it 10 Sleep, Wyoming.
That's pretty pragmatic right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't get much more down to earth than that. It takes me 10 sleeps to get here.
Well, Joe, I'm kind of a geography nut. I can occupy myself for hours with the road atlas. So I kind of I'm just fascinated by the country that I see, and I tend to remember those places. But anyway, suffice to say, you live in an awesome part of the world for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky.
Well, let's talk about what we're here to talk about, and that's the Western Bear Foundation. We actually are a sponsor of the Western Bear Foundation, and we did that because we believe in what you're doing out there, Joe, and you're not only an advocate for hunting, but let's talk a little bit about what the Western Bear Foundation is, and let's get a little backstory on that for our listeners. How'd that all come about?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting story, and to keep it kind of short and sweet and to the point, it was myself and a really good friend of mine I grew up with. We kind of started getting into bear hunting a little bit when we were in high school. We grew up deer and elk hunting and, hunting timber and ridges and stuff, and didn't have a clue about bear hunting. And it was a long journey for us to try and understand what we were doing. And through that process, I think I just really became obsessed with gaining more knowledge on bears. And at that time, which wasn't that long ago, I'm 39. This would have been when I was in high school, so the mid 90s. Not a lot of information out there. Social media wasn't there. There wasn't a lot of internet. There was internet, but there wasn't the forums and the ways to find information. So it was really hard for us. So I kind of just became obsessed with bears and not just hunting them, but like trying to learn more about them so I could be a more successful hunter when it came to bear hunting. And, through the years, kind of got some success and got kind of lucky a few times and actually moved down here and was just kind of like trying to find my way down here as far as like learning the country and kind of learning some of the hunt areas. And I knew you could bait bears down here, so I was trying to kind of figure out how I could go about doing that because I grew up spot and stalk hunting only. And I just kind of started realizing that there was not a lot of information out there for bear hunters, especially when it came to like learning how to bait. A lot of bear hunters are pretty quiet about their secrets, and I don't blame them. The other thing that really caught my attention was how many grizzly bears that we were dealing with in Wyoming and southwest Montana, and kind of how much focus was on the grizzly bear and how little focus was on black bears. We didn't have a count in Wyoming of the actual amount of black bears, but I always joke. I said if a grizzly bear takes a crap from here to West Yellowstone, they know about it. But we can't tell you how many black bears we have in the state. And Wyoming actually has a pretty interesting way of doing things. They run everything on a quota here in Wyoming. So we have a female mortality quota here. So when that quota is filled, the season closes down. And part of that is because it's a fail-safe because they don't really know the population. So they figure through harvest data and everything, these bear management units can maintain that kind of threshold of harvest. And so all that kind of was working in my head, and I'm like, gosh, I just really think it'd be cool if there was an organization out there that was focused on bears and out there for bear hunters. And, I just finally got to the point where it was burning so much in my head and in my heart that I had to do it. And so we went through the process of trying to figure out how to set up a 501c3 and get IRS on board and everything. And not easy to do, but nonetheless, we got it done. In about 2008, I think we became federally registered as an 501c3. And then, we were called actually the Yellowstone Country Bear Hunters Association, and we're kind of working under that moniker for a few years, and then more recently we've changed our name to the Western Bear Foundation, which is a little bit more. It broadens our scope a little bit. We were kind of more specific to the area around Yellowstone Park and hunting only, and we wanted to do so much more. Hunting is a very main part of why we founded the foundation, is to ensure a future for bear hunting. But we also knew that in order to do that, we had to do a lot of stuff on the ground with research and conflict mitigation and working with the state and federal agencies to understand how we're managing our black bears and grizzly bears in the 3 states. And one of our major platforms of founding was to delist the grizzly bear in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem, and put that management into state hands, which would eventually lead to some sustainable hunting seasons for the grizzly bear. So that was kind of why we did what we did. And it's been at times a very long road for me. I'm impatient. I see our future and I want it to be tomorrow, but
right.
These things are a slow roll, and we've grown very organically, but we've grown a lot, and we're doing a lot of stuff on the ground, which is the most important to us. Like if not everyone knows who we are, I guess it doesn't matter, as long as we're keeping with our mission and we're doing what we set out to do. And that's to, ensure a future for bears and bear hunting.
Well, you've covered a lot of territory right there in that brief statement, so we're going to backtrack a little bit and kind of pick that apart a little bit. So you and a buddy, decided that you needed an advocacy group for black bears. There's several groups out there that are putting money into wildlife research, and some of them are faking the funk when it comes to being conservation organizations. But you were bear hunters that started this organization. Am I picking that up right?
Yeah. I mean, we came from the most honest of places when we did this. We didn't have the really cool thing that we set up when we did this was no paid employees. We're all volunteers. And that way, when we set this up and we said that, it was to ensure that anyone involved in this organization was doing it for the bears and for bear hunters and not for personal gain. And so we were true just conservationists at heart, and wanting to be conservationists and wanting to do more. And I think when you look at some of the great things that have been done with groups like RMEF and Mule Deer Foundation and Wild Sheep, and how they've been able to really, ensure that there's a focus for a certain ungulate on the landscape, and that there's people watching that. We wanted that for black bears because we saw nothing out there that was happening. People weren't looking out for black bears' best interests. In some of the agencies, the state agencies, there might be a biologist that was really passionate about it, but at the end of the day, it came down to funding or time or, what's a bigger project that the state wants to do. So we wanted to make sure we were holding people's feet to the fire and say, hey, we have a great species here. It's one of the most iconic in North America, one of the most prolific species in North America. They're almost in every state. And we do nothing. We just treat them like they're an acceptable animal on the landscape, and that's fine. And if we don't really care. And I mean, in Wyoming and in Montana, until not too long ago, you got a bear tag with your elk license, and
right.
They were just considered a predator that you could harvest and didn't have to do anything. And so we're trying to just, catch the bear management up to the level of deer and elk and wild sheep and moose management. I think, it is part of the reason we started this. Well,
I think that's pretty much the case across the board. Back east, I don't know of any state organization or state management agency that is really putting a lot of work into black bears. Sure, they keep track of how many garbage cans they raid and things like that, but as far as having any real data to know what they have, it's kind of up in the air right now. And that's one of the reasons why Steve and I discussed it and we wanted to have you on. Was when I look at your Facebook page or your Instagram page or some of the articles that you publish, some of the things that are written in publications about the Western Bear Foundation, you guys are doing more than just saying, hey, we're bear hunters, we want bears on the landscape. We are conservation minded. We want to help be part of the solution here for conflict mitigation, and talk a little bit about some of the work that the Western Bear Foundation is doing to assist state agencies. Because I know from being in working for a DNR for 28 years, if a sporting group is willing to jump in and take ownership of the resource, according to the North American Model for Wildlife Conservation, and play an active role, these state agencies more than likely will welcome you with open arms. So what kind of things are you guys doing out there that maybe somebody sitting back east here can listen? They might hear this podcast and say, hey, we might be able to do something like that here.
Yeah, and it was a big part of our transition from being just kind of hunting focused. And, there's obviously a lot of things that we're keeping our eye on and working on the hunting side of things. But, to be more effective and actually to ensure a future for bears and bear hunting, you have to ensure a future for bears first and foremost. And part of that involves keeping bears on the landscape. And how do we do that? And part of that is conflict mitigation. Reducing the amount of management actions involving black bears or grizzly bears so that they are not removed by the state and federal agencies and they're left on the landscape for all users, whether it's a sportsman or a photographer or a hiker. And we learned that kind of early on, and how we kind of got to that point, which is something that we could offer, was a point of, we could be a liaison. Early on when we had no money, we could act as liaisons. So we would reach out to the state agencies and say, what are you guys seeing? What do you need from the bear hunting community? What do you need from people that are passionate about bears? And they said, well, we need someone that's willing to be a voice. We have season setting meetings and we have all these meetings concerning black bears and no one shows up. Or, hey, right now a bunch of anti-hunting groups are spending money on projects to reduce conflict, and there's no hunting organizations doing that. And so we worked as an in-between, kind of like, hey, sportsmen want this, state agencies are saying, man, if you did this. And so just like you said, most of the state agencies were like, hey, if you're willing to do that, we're on board. And so what we started doing early on was some conflict mitigation stuff, which the first project we ever did was a landfill fence, and we couldn't afford the money to pay for the fence, so we provided labor. And we went and put an electric fence around a landfill that was getting used by grizzly bears outside of Cody. Mm-hmm. And so we started there, and we built a relationship with the Wyoming Game and Fish Large Carnivore team, which that relationship now is as good as it's ever been, and we work really close together. So it was building that relationship, and they're doing the same thing in Montana, starting very small with a certain working with Wesley up on the Rocky Mountain front in Montana, just reaching out to him and saying, Wesley, we want to be more involved. We want to help with conflict mitigation. We want to help with education awareness. What can we do? And he's like, hey, we have a really small project on a fence. It's a chicken coop. Can you guys help out with that? Yeah, absolutely. So we were just outreach, really reaching out to all these people in Idaho and Montana. And so what we've done the most of with conflict mitigation are those fencing projects that keep bears out of agriculture, livestock, and even human safety, garbage cans and stuff like that. We just this year purchased some bear-proof garbage cans for up in Valier, Montana, because of the town is having so much of the grizzly bears coming in off the Rocky Mountain front, and it's actually become a safety issue. So we had to purchase some special garbage cans because, believe it or not, the people that pick up the garbage that are paid to do that can't leave their truck. It's a safety that their company put in a policy. They can't even get out of their vehicle. So we had to purchase some special garbage cans to allow them to pick those up without getting out of their vehicle. So we do a lot of that. We've been doing bear-proof storage containers on some of the Wyoming state-owned land that the Wyoming Game and Fish owns, like some campgrounds and stuff. We've been funding the placement of bear proof storage containers for campers and kind of just doing a lot of that conflict mitigation stuff. Bear spray giveaways. We do bear spray giveaways. We just got done with a $10,000 bear spray giveaway in Idaho. We gave away about $10,000 worth of bear spray in Idaho on 3 different occasions. And so that gives people a little more education. Maybe that Idaho, Eastern Idaho is an area that's getting more and more grizzly bear problems, and people aren't kind of maybe up to speed. So they came out and got some bear spray. They got some education on living and recreating in grizzly bear territory and country, and how to be safe and how to do that safely. And so just trying to ensure that they're safe out there, and maybe keep a bear or two from getting killed, because, you know, we get a lot of flack for this. People are like, why do you care if the grizzly bears aren't getting killed through management? Well, the only way we're going to delist them is if we maintain current numbers. So we don't want to see any be killed if they don't have to, because that's just one less bear we have when it comes time to delisting them and then maybe getting hunting season. So, you know, a lot of that stuff has happened.
Well, I want to jump in. I want to jump in right there. So what you're saying is that when a bear becomes a problem bear, we're not allowed to hunt it, but the state is killing the bear. Yeah. And last year it was over 40. Yeah, last year we killed over, between Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, and Yellowstone National Park, killed over 40 grizzly bears through management actions. And that was 40 bears that were problem bears, and they needed to be removed because it was either a human safety issue, it was a depredation issue with livestock or property, or it was an encounter with a human. And those bears had become habituated to the point where they were no longer deemed basically a bear that they could leave out on the landscape. And because they can teach their cubs, that's learned behavior. So it's hard to break that generations of learned behavior. If a sow is teaching her cubs to be on a garbage and they don't nip that in the bud, those cubs then become habituated to it, and then they teach their cubs. And so it becomes learned behavior, and we're trying to avoid that. And so us doing some conflict mitigation stuff, which is a drop in the bucket for what needs to be done, helps kind of reduce some of that chance that we might have to remove a bear. And then hopefully one day when we can have a hunting season and we can get this bear delisted, you know, there's more bears available for us. Because the way they set up the hunting season, if we were to have one, and now it's all a moot point, right, because they put them back on the endangered species list, but all that was based off of a mortality quota. And so the less bears killed throughout the year meant more available for hunters. And so people give us grief with that. They're like, why are you protecting them? Well, I'm not protecting them. We want to ensure that there's enough bears out there so we can have a hunting season. And the more bears that are left on the quota, on the mortality quota, it means there's more bears available for sportsmen. Yeah. Well, man, that could be a whole podcast. Steve, you got something? We could go for 2 days on that one. Oh, my gosh.
Well, you know, the things that come to mind for me, Joe, as I listen to you there, and this is all excellent stuff and things that I think that the bear hunting groups out east could certainly benefit from. How do you go about getting the word out to John Q. public about all this good stuff that you're doing for bears? Because I know, like out east here, you know, we've had a black bear population explosion. I grew up in the home of a bear hunter in West Virginia. You know, I went bear hunting from the time I was just a little kid. And I know when bears were fairly scarce. And I know through the efforts of the West Virginia Bear Hunters Association and other groups in the other surrounding states, there was a lot of effort done, a lot of the tooth studies, and we do the hair studies and all those things, and changed the seasons so that the sow bears weren't being killed before they had cubs and so forth. And now the population has really exploded, and I can foresee the eastern bear hunter, the game departments in the east needing the kind of things that you're doing right now with grizzly bears and black bears, I assume. Mm-hmm. We're going to need those kind of programs out east. And I think really, Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I yield to you. I'm interested.
It's really kind of a challenge, and one that I found with bear hunters, and being one myself, I know a lot of old school bear hunters and guys that grew up doing it, and a lot of bear hunters and people that are passionate about bear hunting are fairly guarded, and they. I tell you what the biggest problem we're having now is, and I spoke with Clay about this, is when you have a resource that's not in harm's way, there is less work done to ensure that thing maintains that level.
There you
so
go.
everyone is so happy with the black bear population now, and even in the eastern seaboard and on the East Coast, we're getting to the other way now, where the bears are becoming a point of, we always call it, they have to be socially acceptable. They're reaching a level there, and what happens is there's so many of them, and they're thriving, and so people aren't worried about them. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like when the sheep were almost extinct, or the elk and the moose and the bison, and whenever there's a species facing hardships, then everyone jumps on board. Well, when we have a bear population that's booming, no one seems to care, and even bear hunters don't care. They're just like, what do you need to be around for? There's plenty of bears. It's like, yeah, I know, but
that's what I wanted to hear from you, Joe.
Yeah, that's
because
my
belief
anyway.
I fear that out here.
It's really complacency. It's complacency. And on the eastern seaboard is tricky because, a lot of the stuff that we're doing for conflict mitigation has only really came about out here in the last 10 to 15 years, and it was built out of necessity. And most of it was because of the grizzly bear. I see a lot of black bear conflict, and it goes unheard because the guys on the ground, the biologists and the wardens on the ground, because they're not federally protected, it's their decision. So we're removing gobs of black bears through these, management actions, and no one hears about it because they're not federally protected. It doesn't have to be a news release. And so we're having those problems with black bears right now, but it's okay because everyone's like, we got a lot of black bears. Well, everything ebbs and flows. And so eventually those black bears can't sustain that. We got to do more things, and that's across this country, to ensure that people are okay. They'll accept a black bear in their neighborhood, because that's another thing that's bad for a species is social, people are hate them because they're a nuisance, and that's bad for the species. We don't want to see that either. So it's a long, hard process, and we've been trying to just, whether it's through our membership, email blasts, social media, and just trying to do podcasts like this to tell people, there are things that we're doing that might work for you, or maybe there's other groups doing things that we could use. So that's about the best that I've come up with so far on how to get the word out.
Well, one of the things that I've seen back here, it's not a problem until they become a problem. You know what I mean? The state agencies manage based on how big of a problem is the wildlife. One of the biggest things that I know that Indiana looked at was conflict, social conflict between a farmer and a deer, a raccoon and a homeowner. And you see the same thing down into Tennessee. I've got friends down there where they expanded the bear season to include archery time and different things. And that was all done because they'd been risen to a level of conflict. And as a houndsman, I sit here and I think, well, that's awesome because I can go out and I can catch a bear anytime I want. Yep. So what are some of the things that have you seen out west? Why does a bear move to town? Why does that happen?
Yeah, it's becoming more of there's a lot of factors, and the key holders to the whole like equation, in my opinion, are the relationship with the NGO, which would be us, and the state agencies. Because, for us, we can't just go place an electric fence on national forest.
What's an NGO, Joe? What's an NGO?
It's a non-government organization, someone that's not a part of the government. And so in our case, that'd be us.
Right.
A nonprofit, non-government organization. We can't do the things that the state agencies can do. So you have to work with them. And it's like, hey, we are here to help. We just are dealing with this right now. We actually have a game warden that reached out to me and said, I'm having a lot of problems in this area with black bears. Can you guys help me out with some dumpsters and stuff? So that wouldn't have happened 5 years ago because we weren't built out to where we had those relationships yet. And so that's something on the east side and across the country that they can be doing, reaching out to anyone. And then, what's happening now with these bears is part of the reason our grizzly bears are becoming such a problem is the bucket's full, right? That whole bucket's full mentality. So you're getting sprawl. And the ecosystem can only hold so many.
The population's up. You've got a mature boar moving across the landscape out there. The juvenile boars need to find new territory. So, hey, Cody landfill smells pretty good, and that barbecue smells better. I'm headed that way.
They're in town next time. I mean, we had a grizzly bear in the city limits of Cody last year.
Wow.
So they are pushing out because the bucket's full, you know, and then when that happens is they get into areas that they're not, you know, I don't care what anyone tells you. It might be their native landscape. It ain't going to be their landscape with the way we're living now. It just can't be. We'd have to move entire towns for grizzly bears to be on their native landscape. It's not going to happen. And the demographic monitoring area and the recovery area and where these bears are deemed socially acceptable and where they figure they can live and sustain, they're moving outside of that. And so now we have to deal with it. And so same thing's happening with black bears. As we get a higher abundance of black bears, you know, the same goes, man. Those dominant boars will cruise, they'll push those youngins out, and those youngins will get into areas where they're, and that's typically what we have with black bears, or younger juvenile bears, or older sick bears, or bears that can't get the food. It's not usually the very healthy, you know, 5 and 6 year old boars, or, you know, that 10-year-old sow that's already raised a couple litters. We see it with young bears, and it's, you know, they get kicked out and they don't really have the capacity, or maybe the food source is not great that year. We're seeing it this year in Wyoming really bad because we had a really, really, really late spring. So when a lot of these bears came out, there wasn't the food source available that they're used to. So they were already kind of down on their weight, 30, 40% or whatever. And they moved into areas where there's food, and they're just opportunistic. And a lot of times food's down in these rural or these urban areas. And so we just deal with it, you know, and it's something that's always going to be. But as we start seeing more of it, we as a society have to be better about, okay, yeah, it's nothing for me to leave my garbage in my house until the garbage man picks it up and then I put it out. And if that saves a bear's life, great.
Right. Well, Joe, I'm about 30 miles north of Tampa, St. Pete, Florida, here on the Gulf Coast. Highway 19 is a major artery that runs north and south. I'm here on what they call the nature coast, right where the tourist beaches and all end and the more scenic seacoast begins. 5 miles north of me here on Highway 19, which is a 6-lane north-south artery, there are signs starting at about 5-mile intervals to watch out for bears. Here in Florida, we don't have a season on bears. In fact, a couple of years ago, we did have a quota hunt. I think they wanted to kill a couple of hundred bears. They had a 3-day season, I believe. I may have these numbers wrong, but something like 300 bears were killed, and they shut it down. Years ago, there were 2 counties, Baker and Columbia, in the northern part of the state, where dog hunting for bears was permitted. And, of course, it became an issue for animal rights. Okay, so we have bears running out our ears here in Florida.
You do down there.
Yeah. So we have a member that just took a job as a bear manager in Florida from Idaho, and she told me it's an uphill battle down there. Yeah. Well, I remember hearing you speak about her when you were on the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast with our friend Clay Newcomb, and I hope to meet her. I really do. But I guess here's my question, Joe. In the face of this kind of population explosion and so forth, what's being done maybe in some of the other areas to open the door toward having seasons on bear? You know, I know the anti-hunters are always going to be there with the idea that no animal should be harvested. We know that the hunters are going to be the ones that foot the bill for wildlife management. What do we do down here to move forward? Is anything being done in any other states that you know of that have closed seasons now? Is there a crack in the door anywhere? You know what I've found in dealing with this, because we're dealing with a lot of this in Colorado right now, and there's one major thing that will
determine whether or not it's a doable or not, and that is whether or not it's a state legislative rule or if it's commission rule. So I don't know if Florida has a Game and Fish Commission.
We do. We do.
Okay, and so those bear seasons should be managed, and all wildlife management should come at a commission level, not at a legislative level.
Correct.
What happened in Colorado with their spring bear season is they did it legislatively. And so to get that changed for a spring bear season in Colorado, which they have a whole host of issues with bear problems because they have no spring season, they have to do that legislatively now. And they're a fairly blue state that doesn't have a lot of people that would probably push a bill like that. And so in Florida, if it's a commission rule, that's a bunch of sportsmen getting together and talking to the commissioners and working with the commissioners and trying to get that done. And then you always are going to have the anti-lawsuits and all that. But if it's a commission rule, that can be done by the masses, like by us sportsmen can work with our commissioners to do that. So that'd be one thing to find out in any area. I believe in New Jersey, that's a legislative thing. I think that's a mess there too.
Well, but we went through that in Michigan, being a referendum state. I lived there for 22 years.
Okay.
And we fought that battle. And of course, we were able to win it because we countered with what we call Prop G, a bill, I guess you would say, that would put the control of the wildlife resource in the hands of the experts in the DNR.
That should happen everywhere.
Right. So
because they're the ones that know best. And like I look at it in Florida, you guys can hunt alligators, right?
Yeah. Well, I think there are. I think it's a draw system or something like that. Yeah.
I don't know why a black bear is so much more. I mean, an alligator is a danger and a threat if it's in your yard or whatever. And I look at it the same way it's going to happen with these black bears is there's more and more, and not saying it's gonna, but as we get more and more, which Florida's exploding with them, there's just going to be more of an issue for human safety. And what are they going to do? They're just going to pay the state agency to remove all these bears. And
correct.
Sportsmen will do that and pay the state to do it.
That's always been my argument in the years that I was with the kennel clubs and worked on these types of issues for many years, Joe. And it always puzzled me when I saw the situation in Oregon and Washington and all of that. And to see that, the government is now having to do the job that hunters would willingly pay to do. The taxpayers are paying for these depredation. Is that the word?
Yeah, depredation. Yep.
It's late, fellas. I apologize that the words won't come, but at any rate, that's been the thing that's always been maddening for me, is that the hunters' dollars will pay for the management of the resource, keep it in check, if you will, and
that's the model that Wyoming and Montana and Idaho have used forever. Almost all the wildlife agencies in those three states are funded by hunters and fisher dollars. I mean, that's how they pay for the management of the resource. And that's why we always get in kind of a fussy battle with some of the people that want to have a stake in management, but they don't hunt and they just take pictures and sell the pictures and make money. Well, they're not paying for that resource to be managed. We are. And they say a lot of hunters and everyone get the first say. And it's like, because it's our money that's paying to be managing these animals,
Precisely.
And that's that whole model. And when you take out hunters out of an equation, everything has to be managed. We don't live in a perfect utopian society now where wildlife can live in and amongst urban centers. It doesn't exist. So we have to manage wildlife. And it's not managing to a level of extinction. It's managing them to levels of health where they can live with humans on the same landscape.
True. Good stuff.
That's great
but
stuff.
That's a hard thing to do with because if any time that is done on the legislative level, then that becomes who we're voting in. And sadly enough, I don't think we ever have enough of the sportsman-minded people that are, at least in some of the eastern part of the country. I know in Montana, I know in Wyoming, almost everyone that's probably in legislation, or that's a legislator or senator, is probably a hunter or fisherman.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. I'm just curious your opinion on this, Joe. The first tenet of the North American Model for Wildlife Conservation is that all wildlife will be held in public trust. Due to the shift in our culture, is that still, in your opinion, the best model?
I think it is. Unfortunately, it's not a rule and it's not law, because we as sportsmen would have a lot more say in what happens with wildlife if it was a law. It's a model. And I do still believe.
You really think so?
Like if that was a rule,
but
a law.
But the first tenet is it's a public trust. That means, your Starbucks crowd gets the same voice that you get.
True.
I've been kicking this around. I mean, these are the demons that swim around in my head at night. When I can't go to sleep. I
deal with it a lot, and I'll probably get a lot of flack for this, but I don't care. I've never minced words, but I have this issue with people that photograph and they take pictures of the species and then they make money off it, but they're the same ones that say we can't hunt these animals. That frustrates me. But if it in the first tenet, it would be as much their wildlife as it is my wildlife.
Yeah, they're not paying for anything.
But I think what
they're
Joe
not,
is
but
saying,
it is a public resource.
Yeah, and I think what Joe may be saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Joe, but I think you may be saying that yes, it is. It does belong to all the public, but all the public should pay an equal share for the management.
I agree with that. I think everyone should be able to enjoy wildlife however they choose. There's some other things in the North American model that would kind of fix the whole public, even people that don't hunt get a say in it when it comes down to hunting as a way to manage wildlife.
But have you thought about this, Joe? Have you thought about this? Okay, say, a backpack tax is something that gets kicked around a lot, especially in the West.
Yep.
Let's start charging a backpack tax for every person that wants to go hike on this trail. We start charging backpack taxes. What is that going? We cannot keep up with the REI crowd.
No, and you make a solid point there. Like, we have the ability now because we pay for it to have more of a say.
Yeah,
that's our in, and it is a valid point. Like, because we pay for it, it's basically like it's ours. We have first say, and that is a nice thing for us sportsmen to have.
And I think a lot of people want to make sure that stays that way too. And that's what scares me when I hear some of the outdoor industry leaders starting to talk about backpack taxes, is you let them start pitching in the kitty and something that a government agency can get their hands on. And our 5% of hunters, the population 5%, kiss that one goodbye, because you're going to be managing for backpackers and photographers, not hunters anymore. I've seen it. I've seen it over and over again.
You're going to end up seeing the same thing that happens in our federal government. There'll be paid lobbyists that are, it's a money game at that point. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough nut to crack, because when those people wrote that North American Model for Conservation, and it's something that a lot of the agencies in the West use, they probably weren't expecting issues like we're having right now.
No.
And I think in their mind, when they said public trust and all wildlife is for the public, I think there's a different time in this country when we didn't have some of the issues and strife we do now. And had they wrote it now, I don't know that would be in there. And it's interesting to see how that's a lot of the North American model has been relatable through all these years, but there are certain things that through the way society is now and the way we manage with government and everything now, it's some of those points might not be as good and ones we want.
A thought comes to mind with me is that now there's a general idea out there that if it's free, it's for me. You know, everything's free. The internet's free. Yeah. Okay.
This podcast is free.
Yeah. You know, I mean, that's a challenge we get, you know, when airing a podcast, you know, because it is free. But, you know, the hunter has long expected to pay for a license. You know, I pay for a trout stamp. I pay for national forest stamps. I pay, you know, I buy licenses for probably at least a half a dozen states every year. And I expect to do that. And my friends do. And we've always accepted that as the way that the game is managed. It's through our funds and through our Pittman Robertson funds for excise on firearms and ammunition and all those things. And so I guess I'm hopeful that, you know, that will continue and that there might be a pushback from the if it's free, it's for me crowd against some of these other things. And they maybe they won't see it as a way to get representation, and they'll just, you know, say, no, I don't want to pay that tax. I'm going to fight it. And maybe, you know, things won't change. Do you think there's any chance of that happening?
I think there's a lot of truth to that, because there are a lot of people that do backpack and people that do take photos and they make money off the resource or whatever that would not pay the tax just because they're going to say, well, I'm just up here hiking. I'm not paying money. So the Game and Fish and the Fish and Game agencies can manage wildlife. I don't really care. And a lot of those people are, you know, weekend warriors. You know, how much do they really care about the species? And what I see in these grizzly bear meetings is there are people at those meetings voicing their opinion that aren't sportsmen. And so they do have a voice in that capacity. As you can see, so much of a voice and so much money that they were able to sway a court decision, in my opinion.
Right.
And so there is a voice for them. I actually think we are undervoiced as sportsmen, or we're not listened to in the right spaces in certain areas, I don't think, as often as we should be.
I'll just throw in a final thought, and then we'll get back to hound stuff. That was pretty deep. But, you know, we talk about the wildlife model, North American model for wildlife conservation. That thing was written in 1870. And in 1900, the demographics of the United States, over 70% of the population was still agricultural based, so they knew where their meat came from. And you look at that today, we're under 5% of the United States population that is agricultural based. So, you know, it is a different time, and it is a different era that we're living in now, where people just don't understand what goes on the ranch or what goes on the farm. And so it's definitely a cultural problem as well. But Joe, let's get back around to, so you're having a lot of success out there. You're collaring bears, you're assisting state agencies that are gladly, willingly accepting your, whether it be labor or funds that you can raise through the foundation. What do you tell a group of bear hunters back east here? What do they need to do to make sure that they have a legitimate voice when decisions about bear management, bear hunting are being made? What can you tell them that has been successful for you out there?
The biggest thing they have to do is organize and have a strong couple points that they as a group want to see happen, whether they're North Carolina, West Virginia, and some strong organizations out there, you know, Michigan and Wisconsin. And the thing I think is the most crucial part is don't have 20 of the members go to a meeting and all voice a different opinion. They have to get organized and structured and say, okay, we live in West Virginia and we're noticing this. We want more harvest, or we want more chase seasons, or we want more whatever. They have to develop a plan and a strategy, and then they have to start going to the state agencies, whether they're season setting meetings or public input meetings, or they're just working closely with, out west here, there's typically one or two people in each region or in the state that manage the seasons, and they work with biologists. And, those are the people to get in with and visit with, and sitting down and having one of your members or the president sits down and has a cup of coffee with that guy and just get to know him. And then maybe one day you give him a call on the phone and say, hey, I was just kind of curious how you guys are counting or doing this. Maybe I can jump in. And it's being involved, but it's not. I see this so much out here. It's the fire and brimstone attitude that sportsmen have, because we're always on the defensive. We're so afraid we're going to lose this or we're going to lose that we're guarded, right? So we're always nervous, and we don't trust these state agencies sometimes. And it's trying to go a different way. It's being more proactive and trying to try and bridge that gap and say, hey, we understand there's an issue with bears, and we want our rights to chase, or we want our rights to bait. Mm-hmm. But what's really going on with you guys? Like, what are the thought processes there, and how can we help maybe show you why we think this is the way? And so it's developing relationships. That's the biggest thing, because I've gone to some season setting meetings, and I've sat in commission meetings where a panel is sitting there. They are dictating whether or not you're going to get a season or this or that. They get a vote. And 20 guys, all from the same, I would say, maybe thought of or method of hunting, whether it's baiting or hound hunting or spot and stalk, will show up and holler and scream and bang their hand on the table and get frustrated with the commission. Those are volunteer people too. They are not going to be responsive to anything you say when you do that. So it's having a concise, very thought out and researched one voice as a group, and you get that piece done. Then you've just developed all those relationships. So then you move on to the next, and then you just build on that through years, and it takes years. It's nothing you can do in a day, but I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen, and why we've been able to get some things done is because I'm just calling people and saying, hey, think about us when you need some help, and how can we help? And we're here for you. And if you need us to do some PSAs or whatever, we're here to help. And then they're really receptive when it comes time to saying, hey, Joe, do you think you could get 10-year members to sit on a panel and we talk about the Wyoming black bear seasons and what maybe they want to change? That's never happened before. But we get that through being present and helping and being collaborative, not combative.
Well, right. Joe, you're absolutely right. And hearing it come from you definitely will encourage people out there to do that. Chris and I both have a background in that kind of work. It was my job for many years, work with legislative affairs with the registries that I worked with. And what you're saying is spot on, but it can't be said enough. And to see an organization like you that is having, like yours, that is having success out there, when we started this podcast, Chris, I'm sure will agree with me, our desire was to bring all houndsmen together under a common cause, and that is to preserve, protect, and promote these sports for future generations. And that includes conservation. That includes all of the things that are associated with hunting with hounds. And, when I look at organizations like the Michigan Bear Hunters Association, Michigan Hunting Dog Federation, I served on both of those boards when I was there. Chris with the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance that he and Jerry Mall founded while he was with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. Those things, we know what you are saying is true. We know it will work, but I think sometimes, people expect us to say these things. And it's so refreshing to hear you saying virtually the same things that we've been trying to say as well. And to have a successful organization. And I think you're definitely taking it to the next level, but with your proactive programs that you're doing, and the way you're reaching out to the community and presenting yourselves as the good guys, and the champion of bears, not the killer of bears, but the champion of bears.
Exactly.
And
That's
I think that's what we need to do. And I applaud
it's really
you.
true. Well, I appreciate it. I think that's most of these foundations and groups started and have the heart and the intent that we do. It's just sometimes I see it so much that we are so, like I said, we're just so defensive and we don't want to lose anything. And we've been in some pretty strong fights, and a lot of it has been with the potential to lose baiting or the potential to lose a chase season. And it is tough and it can be frustrating. And the first thing you want to do is scream at someone. But what I've found the best thing for us, we dealt with this in Idaho a few years ago with a bear bait ban in grizzly use area. I didn't chew ass. I didn't call anyone and holler. I called the commissioners that were in that area, and I had hours-long conversations with them and just trying to talk to them about what do they understand about bear baiting and what's this and research and volunteering to come to Idaho and just sit down with them and just talk about it. Just talk, have open dialogue. And, over the course of time, we changed some minds and we got that stopped. And I think that's the best way to go about it. And we all have our things that we're really passionate about. For me, it's bears, but I also am really passionate about, baiting, and I want to start hound hunting, and I'm passionate about certain things. And so maybe something comes under attack like baiting and a bunch of other bear hunters don't bait. Are they going to come to the table and support it? And that's where I find the biggest divide in bear hunters, especially out west. Spot and stock guys look down on guys that bait or hound hunt, or bait hunters and hound hunters in Idaho are fist fighting on roads. And I'm just like, folks. And so when we go to season setting meetings and a guy's going to lose a chase season and a guy's going to lose this, everyone's just kind of like, and it's trying to break that down a little bit and just be like, hey, I'm out here a hunter, you're a hunter, we're bear hunters. We got to figure out a way that we're not against each other.
I'll tell you a quick story. I just got back from a hunt in Arizona, and we were out there, of course, hound hunting and stuff like that. But we go down, we turn down this road, and open access pretty much in Arizona, and we were on our side by sides, and noticed this younger guy walking down the trail in front of us, and we get up next to him, and he's carrying a rifle, and you can tell he's a spot and stalk guy. And stopped and talked to him, said, hey, everything all right? You need to ride out. You need with this, you need that. No, I'm just hunting. Well, we went on down the trail and we made a left turn and got up on top of this ridge, and he comes right up there, and we could tell right then that we were going to interfere with his hunt. And maybe it was subconscious, but you've got to be able to look at other people that are in the field. This guy was out there on a hunt as much as I was, and he was out there hoofing it. I was riding around in a side-by-side with my hounds. I can find another place to hunt that day and let this guy have his opportunity. And it was kind of a harmonious moment,
That's so commendable because...
Well, I don't say that. It was not even my idea. I was hunting with some other guys, and it was just kind of a general consensus. It's like, we can't go much farther down this trail anyway, so let's turn around and get out of here. So, we've got to be more understanding, and just because it's not the way I do it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And we need all hands on deck in this fight. And we can't afford to alienate anybody at this point.
What I was really encouraged this year and to a lot of people that don't know, there's an actual intent to stop bear baiting on national forest lands in Wyoming and Idaho, which is a very very serious deal. And we won't even get into the semantics of it and everything, but they're using the grizzly bear as a way to stop bear baiting. And it's basically been told to us that the people that have filed it just don't like bear baiting. And we're not only talking about livelihoods of outfitters and guides, we're talking about how the departments are going to manage a species. You know, there's parts of Idaho you can kill 2 bears a year. How are they going to manage that species without baiting? And so we developed a letter that we sent to the chief of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife or the U.S. Forest Service. We sent it to the director's office, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, sent it to all the commissioners. Well, when I was requesting sign-ons for that letter, I was so pleased at the groups that signed on to that had zero stake in the matter. Pheasant hunting groups, mule deer hunting groups, you know, hound hunting organizations. They just said every one of those groups understood it like I understand it, and you guys do too. They're like, if they get this, what's next? Exactly. And they were all rallying with a bunch of guys that they don't even maybe bait hunt. We had some people that are like, we don't bait hunt, we don't know, but we're not going to let them stop. That's what we need. And it was so cool to send that with 20 signatures of big groups that not even any of them bait. They don't even care, but they're like, hey, sportsman with sportsman. That's the way it should be. And so I think we're getting there. But it's a lot of talking, a lot of education, and there are those nuts that you just cannot crack. And I've tried some of them.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had that in Michigan with the Prop D to stop bear hunting with hounds and bait in 1996. It was a referendum issue. Had it not been for the entire hunting community in Michigan, you know, there's 750,000 deer hunters up there, and they understood that this was an anti-hunting issue, a domino among many that would fall, you know, and once again, Joe, you're right on.
You know, I'd like to kind of run down a list of things, you know, just some things that we can do to be proactive on this. You know, one of the things that a representative told me one time, it's not nearly as important that you know my name. It's more important that I know your name. You know, if I run into my representative in the Walmart, he needs to be able to recognize me, and I need to be able to have a conversation with him. You know, as much as I would like to camp at 9,300 feet in the White Mountains of Arizona and stay up there, if I want to continue hunting, I've got to come out of the mountains. I've got to know. I've got to know who my bear biologists are. He's got to know who I am. He's got to see me and my compadres, you know, showing up on days where they need a bear fence put up, or they need you know, Indiana has a thing called the Hoosier Outdoor Experience, and the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance sends people up there to interact with the public with tree dog breeds. And so that the first time somebody's interaction with a hound dogger is not when they're across their fence and they don't know what's going on. You know, they can put a face with it. So, you know, there's certain things that we've got to do. And as much as we're living in the golden era of bear hunting right now in the East with the populations where they're at, man, the off seasons, we got to do some homework, and we've got to start building defenses, because it's going to come. It's going to come, and it's going to come in a big way. You got some thoughts, Joe?
You hit it right on the head. It's an education piece, and shame on anyone that just is waiting for someone else to save it for them. I see that so much. Well, you talk to all these people that are so passionate about hunting, they don't even know who a biologist is, what they do. They don't know why the regs are the way they are, and that's very sad to me, because what they're depending on is the federal and state agencies and sportsmen like us that are involved to take care of it for them. And one day I'm not going to be here, and you guys aren't going to be here, and what's going to happen then? So it's being involved, being educated. Like you said, come out of the mountains for a day or two and do some homework, jump on a computer, learn about it, talk to someone on the phone, or just and some people have a tough time reaching out, but you probably have someone in your organization that doesn't. And so that's your point of contact.
Yeah,
go to a biologist.
These organizations are so diverse. I mean, we got people that that are sales, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
they're just all sorts of walks of life. And I promise you this, there is a biologist, whether you know if there's a bear biologist in your state or not, there is a biologist who has been assigned bears. And what they do
Absolutely.
is they sit in an office and they read a lot of emails. They field a lot of complaints from different people, and they would love for somebody to walk in their office and say, how can I help you with this problem? Is there
They
anything
would
that my
absolutely
organization can
love it.
do?
They would be thrilled
Mm-hmm.
because they all want to be on the ground anyways.
Yeah.
When we did this collar study, and I get to work with the head black bear biologist for the state of Wyoming, and we gave him quite a bit of dollars to put these collars on some bears for some research. And he's like, oh, it's so nice to get out and do this, you know, and like so much of his time is spent dealing with grizzly bears and management actions. He's like, I'm out here now getting to put collars on bears and be in the field. Like, they love it. And they would be like, what do you have in mind? And you can maybe shoot an idea at them. And I've done this a million times. They're like, that just simply won't work. I'm like, okay, I'll think of something else that we can do. And, you know, it's just that feedback, bouncing back and forth. But once they know you're interested, that's the game changer right there.
That's
because if something does come up for bears, they're going to be like, I'm going to call that guy he came into my office. I got his card here. I'm going to call him and we're going to talk. And that's where you start.
Yep. You get an organization that you know, takes some of their funds and throws together enough funds to buy 20 bear-proof trash cans and put them in a state camping area, and you know, things like that. That way, they know that you've got skin in the game and you're willing to work for the resource, and we're not these bloodthirsty killers. We actually care about these animals.
And that's a big thing. That's a big thing too. Not all hunting, but the actual resource. You're doing things for the resource, so you're going to get a seat at the table when it comes time to make some decisions.
That's right. That's
absolutely.
What we're looking for.
Joe, I'm going to have to meet this biologist friend of yours. I just attended.
I will have to get you and Amber fixed up. She's awesome. I just spoke to her yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Definitely. Now, there's a new organization that's formed here over the last year in Florida. It's called the American Houndsman Federation. A fellow named Bruce Conkey up at Hastings, Florida, up in the Jacksonville, south of Jacksonville. But at any rate, I'll get those guys, Bruce and your friend, hooked up there, and
that'd be great.
We'll do what we can down here to maybe get some help for her and her efforts. But,
I will send Chris an email with all of her contact information,
great.
And we could get that started right now over the phone. We just did that.
Good.
There you go. We're moving forward.
We're moving right along.
Hey, we're going on over an hour here, and but I want to talk a little bit about the Western Bear Foundation some more here, Joe, and I want to. So, you know, we've got chapters of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation in Indiana. I've lived there my whole life. I've never seen an elk. So
yeah.
So what's the deal? I mean, can people start chapters for the Western Bear Foundation? When I look at Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and the successes they've had, support and resources, I mean, they're huge now. They're nationwide, and is there a vehicle in place if somebody wants to expand the Western Bear Foundation east of the Mississippi River? Is there a vehicle for that, or what's the story there?
Yeah, actually, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because my vision, and I think I share this with some people, I think, is to have a national organization that is representing bears and bear hunters and looking at every state. And I think we can do that one day. As I said, I'm a stupid business grad that somehow got involved with nonprofits and conservation. And so my knowledge, and I'll be the first to say, I don't know that I'm the guy that will be able to bring us into that next tier. But what we're trying to do right now is develop those chapters. And we haven't had a chapter in place. What we've been doing is having like a person in each state that kind of just looks out for opportunities and is kind of a go-to for me. But what we just are in the process of finishing the paperwork in the state of Washington for our first chapter, actually. Our first chapter that will be, they will operate kind of under the Western Bear Foundation moniker, but it'll be set up similar to like how the Army F does their chapters. They'll raise their own money. Their money will stay in that state for projects for them, and they'll use Western Bear Foundation as an overarching organization, but they'll have their own 501c3 status, and they'll have their own board. And so that is being done as we speak right now in Washington. I think by the end of the year, potentially early next spring, we'll announce that is an official 501c3 registered chapter of the Western Bear Foundation. And I'm hoping after that, because it's been we have a guy in Washington that's been saving and has been really good about knowing how to do some of that paperwork, and he's kind of just taken the ball on that and is getting it done. And so once we kind of have all his hard work, we'll know how to do it in the other states a little easier. So yeah, definitely. And reach out to us if there's, I don't care if you're in New Jersey, Oklahoma, Arkansas, wherever, if we can help, we're here to help. We're called the Western Bear Foundation, but we're here for all bears and all bear hunters. So
sure.
That's
Where do people find you, Joe? Tell us
place,
where we can find you.
westernbearfoundation.org. We're on Facebook and Instagram and all them social media things. On the website, that phone number on there and that email address, that comes right to my phone. So when you call me. You don't call an office, and so you're going to get me direct. We're really grassroots. We're really laid back, kind of boots on the ground people. So that's how you can get a hold of us.
westernbear.org.
westernbearfoundation.org.
Don't leave the foundation out. westernbearfoundation.org. And then, of course, on all our favorite social media platforms.
That's right. Yeah.
Steve, you got any concluding thoughts on this?
Well, I for one, am going to spread the word in my network of state associations and affiliations. I'll be going up to Michigan this winter for the Upper Peninsula Bear Houndsman Association meeting. Joe and Nancy Hudson. I don't know if you've met them, Joe, but
no, but I've been, and I will say that when we've been dealing with this bear bait ban, I've received several calls from Michigan and Wisconsin on how they can help. So it's been really kind of awesome.
Those guys are awesome up there, and I'll be up there speaking, and I'm going to encourage those groups to get in touch with you. And over here, I'm originally from West Virginia, and I'm planning a trip up to Virginia to do some bear training here within a few weeks, and I'll try to spread the word out here on the Eastern Seaboard. But you're doing a great job. I think this is the kind of thing that all of these groups out east need to kind of come under that umbrella with you, and develop these chapters as you get them going. And my dad, everything that I owe in the hound world, I know about the hound world, the job that I had for many years, and all I owe to my dad. And he was the most dedicated bear hunter I have ever met. He cared nothing about killing a bear, although he did kill a few in his lifetime. He was a hound hunter. He loved the bear resource. He served as the president of the West Virginia Bear Hunters Association. He worked hard to keep them from clear-cutting the national forest to take away the mass crop from the bear. He was just a bear hunter to the bone, and in his honor, I want to do all I can as well for a great, great game animal. I really appreciate what you're doing, Joe, and what your foundation is doing. And if we can help you in any way on this podcast, anytime you've got any news, pass it along to us. We'll be glad to include it in a podcast, and we hope you'll come back.
Oh, I will come back anytime, and I hope to one day meet you guys in person. I know I've yet to be behind some hounds on a bear hunt, so it's definitely up on top of my list. I've done every other method but that, so maybe we can
arrange
get together one day and do that. Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Come out east or something, or we can do it out here. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to put in for you. Well, I'm not. We may be bear hunting in Idaho, or I can get you hooked up with somebody that will be bear hunting in Idaho, Joe. You just say the word. But, Joe, you got any concluding thoughts on anything you want to throw in there before I wrap it up?
I want to thank you guys for being proactive and trying to be a good voice for Houndsman, and not only Houndsman, but just for sportsmen in general. There's not a lot of podcasts out there that are geared towards doing what you guys are doing. A lot of them are grip and grin. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and thanks for your support over the years. It's been awesome that groups from so far away all have the same kind of thing in mind, and it relies on our bears and our way of life, and that's hunting. So thank you guys.
Yeah, well, I'll just wrap it up and give Steve the final word here. But, there's no doubt that houndsmen are definitely under fire all across the United States. And just that phone call, that thing, that email that you can send to a biologist to tell them that you're available to help in their fight, they really do want to do the best thing for the resource, and they get frustrated just like everybody else. I know biologists over the years, they spend so much time on the phone talking to aggravated landowners and dealing with bureaucracy that they don't get to do the job that they want to do. And just as Joe has already laid out there, they want to be in the field. So if you can show them how you can use your hounds to help them in research and to come up with a bear management plan, man, you need to be sitting down with your membership and coming up with a proposal to put out there to your fish and wildlife agencies to help get that done. And Joe, I really appreciate the work you guys are doing, and I didn't even hesitate when I saw the Western Bear Foundation and getting a hold of Steve and saying, hey, this is a group we need to support. These guys are doing some good work in the right way. They're building credits with their fish and wildlife agencies to make sure that sportsmen have a voice in those commission hearings. So, Joe, congratulations to you. I wish you all the best, and we definitely are going to have to get together and have you back on the podcast. Maybe we'll sit down live for the next one.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
We need to go to Cody, Steve.
Oh, absolutely.
There you go.
I'm ready.
Come out to Cody.
Hey, you know what? I need there is a cutthroat trout out there that I need to catch.
Which one, Snake River or Yellowstone?
I don't care. I'm not choosy.
We can get 3 of them out of the way right outside of Cody.
Hey, you know what? I've never caught a cutthroat. I'll confess.
Oh, come out at the end of July next year.
Browns, brookies, and rainbows. Yeah, I've done all those, but I've never caught a cutthroat.
You're carrying bear spray this time.
Cutthroat. Yeah, well, if you're coming with me, you're carrying bear spray. We'll be in Grizzlyville.
That sounds like a plan to me, my friend.
Awesome. Steve, you guys are welcome anytime.
All right.
We'll have to make a plan of that. Steve, you always have the final word unless I'm recording a podcast without you.
Well, let's hope we don't do too many of those.
Yeah.
Joe, we have a bear hunting friend out in West Virginia. He's one of the hardest hunters I've ever seen. This guy, he'll go in the woods. A guy once told me that he went hunting for a week with him, and we asked him, where did you stay? And he said, well, we had a camper, but we never did stay in it. This guy will sleep out on the ground with the dogs. And one time, my dad relayed this statement to me as they were attempting to start the track of a bear that had been killing sheep. And they turned the dogs loose, and part of the pack went one way, and this fella's dog went the other way. And they said, hey, what's your dog doing, John? He said, you guys follow your dogs, and I'll follow mine. And I've ended this podcast with that saying so many times. Chris, you follow your hound, and I'll follow mine.